Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, we intended to come into the show today talking about the games last night, the game twos in the NBA playoffs last night, and then previewing some of the game twos that were going to take place tonight. Kyrie Irving had different plans for us as he decided to use his post-game press conference to, and we're going to get to this at length, I'm going to say gaslight the entire country and the entire city of Boston. Honestly, Sap, this, I didn't think it would, but this actually really affected me. It put me in just like a foul mood. I already don't like Kyrie Irving, but the best thing I can say right now is I feel like you just said, Sep, like he's gaslighting an entire city of people, an entire country of people as to what actually happened with him in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 years he was here, we know the fan base really embraced Kyrie Irving. They loved him. You'd go to a game and you'd see, felt like half the crowd wearing number 11 jerseys. Before the start of his second season, which turned out to be his last season, he told the crowd, my plan is to come back here if you'll accept me. And the crowd went nuts. And I remember we were doing Herald Radio. You and Mike Molino were both on board saying, oh, this is great. Kyrie's going to commit to here, and they're going to get Anthony Davis, and they're going to win championships. Our producer at the time, Christian Burgoyne, and I were like, hold off, because Kyrie has a tendency of being such a narcissist that, he always has to put himself into the story, which I think he's doing again here. So the 2 years here, I think he was embraced. I don't know what's happened in the 2 years since he left. He's played one game at TD Garden. That was Christmas Day, just 6 months ago. There were no fans in the stands. He didn't play in either game at TD Garden last year because he went through some injury concerns. I can't speak on his behalf that maybe something happened while he was here in the 2 year period, or maybe something has happened in the 2 years since, or maybe something happened when he was with Cleveland. I can't push back against that. I'm not a black man. I don't live literally in his skin. So I don't know what the situation is with Kyrie Irving. If this came from Chris Paul or Dame Lillard or Steph Curry or LeBron James, we'd take it seriously, right? Because LeBron James has been coming to Boston for 18 years. I've never really heard him say anything bad about the city. He seems to enjoy when he comes here, and there's no bigger villain than LeBron James in the city of Boston as a basketball player. I mean, you'd have to go back to maybe Magic Johnson, and Magic's run wasn't as long as LeBron's run. So if it came from a more reputable player in terms of someone who doesn't just seem to troll like Kyrie Irving does, we take it more seriously. But it doesn't mean something could not have happened. The disturbing part about this for me, Jet, is, and I'm going to look at it more analytically than emotionally, I think that kind of happens when you get older, is I haven't heard anybody outside of Kendrick Perkins kind of refute these claims by Kyrie Irving. And again, they weren't really claims by Kyrie Irving. It was more macro than micro. But Kendrick Perkins came out and said, look, I played 8.5 years in Boston. I never faced racism on or off the court. But none of the current players, and they have the ability to do this on Twitter, have come out and refuted what Kyrie Irving said, whether it's Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, the two most high-profile players on this team. We know Marcus Smart's had some concerns with racial issues in Boston in the past. So is it still there? Yeah, probably. I mean, two things can happen at the same time, Jet. You can go to TD Garden and root for the player, and then 2 hours later, if you're in the same restaurant or in the same bar with them, treat them differently. I mean, we saw just this last weekend, Dominique Wilkins, who is a god in Atlanta. I mean, he is probably the most popular athlete in that city's history, other than, of course, the great Henry Aaron.
Was denied. Statue there.
He's got a statue there. He's Mr. Hawk. And he still, I think, lives in the area. He was there over the weekend, and he was denied service at a restaurant, they said, because of a dress code. If Paul Pierce had gone through that in Boston last weekend, and we were told that Pierce was not allowed into a restaurant because he wasn't properly dressed, I will guarantee you that Bomani Jones and every other pundit on ESPN would just absolutely blast the city of Boston. With Atlanta, not so much. And I'm sure Atlanta's had racial issues as well. Every major city has had racial issues. I think we've gotten better in Boston than, say, 40, 50, 60 years ago. There's still problems, but I think we're heading in the right direction. It's just the the narrative nationally, like you said, Jet, gaslighting it is a perfect way to describe it, is now going to be, oh, there's Boston again. Another NBA star is saying that he's had issues in Boston. And it doesn't help the Celtics. None of their players are refuting it. And if that's the opinion of the players in the league, the Celtics are fucked. Because how are you going to recruit a free agent player, unless it's Luka Doncic or some white guy, to play in Boston if the players think there's a problem in Boston? That's the next part of this that, the Celtics are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's, Sap, I'm trying to take emotions out of it, but I really can't, because what I feel like Kyrie's done here is taken away the fans' right to boo him for what happened in Boston. He's created a narrative where if they boo him, they're racist. And I think that's just such a terrible thing to have done. It's the exact same thing that people hate when you talk about racists and other things. You're painting with such a broad brush of, labeling the city of Boston as racist, labeling Celtics fans as racist, the organization. The Celtics organization, I know we've been over this before, Sap, are the Brooklyn Dodgers of the NBA. First black player drafted was by the Celtics. First all-black starting five was by the Celtics. First black head coach by the Celtics. They have been always the most racially inclusive organization in basketball. Those are just facts. Maybe before I get into this a little bit more, Sep, should I just read exactly what he said?
Sure.
All right, so this is what he said, just in case you didn't hear it, just to get you fully caught up. So he was doing his post-game interview after, by the way, the Nets absolutely embarrassed and trounced the Celtics, which, wasn't fun anyways. But here's what he said when asked about coming back to Boston and being booed. It's not my first time being an opponent in Boston. I'm just looking forward to competing with my teammates, and hopefully we can just keep it strictly basketball. There's no belligerence or racism going on, subtle racism, and people yelling shit from the crowd. Even if it is, it's part of the nature of the game, and we're just going to focus on what people can control. And then when he was asked if he'd experienced it in Boston, suggesting racism, Irving said, I'm not the only one who could attest to this, but it just is what it is. The whole world knows it. So, like I said, Seb, it seems to me like Gaslighting 101. This is the first time he said any of that. It also happens to coincide with the first time fans will be in attendance when he was playing against the Celtics in Boston. We know he was going to get booed. And the reason he was going to get booed, in my mind, and I think most people would agree to this, has nothing to do with racism. Maybe a couple people, but I feel like that would be any arena in any city in the world. It's because of how things went in Boston. It has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with, he told the fans he was going to come back. He made a commercial saying he wanted his number in the rafters. He didn't attend a Game 7 in Boston because he went to get a nose job for his movie. He quit on the team in the Milwaukee series, and that whole season long, Sap, he quit on the team. He was difficult with coaches and players. That's all stuff that has been proven and attested to. And he is saying, nope, if I get booed, it's not because of any of that. It's because of racism, subtle racism. That I just can't abide by, Sap. I think that's such crap and such of a gaslighting mentality for Kyrie to say that and take away fans who are frustrated with how he quit on the team and how he abandoned the team after saying he was in here for the long haul. They should be able to boo him and not be labeled as racist for doing it. I just think that's so unfair.
Right. I mean, when Paul Pierce came back here as a member of the Brooklyn Nets, and when Kevin Garnett came back here was members of the Brooklyn Nets, I don't recall anybody really booing those guys because it was time to move on. They were old. They got great draft capital in return from the Nets, which is kind of ironic because at that point you would say, boy, the Celtics are really running the organization well. They traded 2 future Hall of Famers for all this draft capital, which turned into Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And here we are, 7 years, 8 years later, and it's the Nets that have a super team and the Celtics are just spinning around in circles. The thing with that is that I think with Kyrie Irving, I think this was strategic in some sense, and I think you're going to agree with me on this, Jet, because this is now putting a shield in front of him that if anyone boos him on Friday night, for game 3, or more likely Monday, which is going to be game 4 in front of a full house. If people want to attend the Celtics game, you can sell out the Garden on Monday night. Maybe people don't want to lay out the money to go out there and see yet another slaughter by the Brooklyn Nets. But he's going to get booed. And look, I've never been someone to boo. I mean, I've worked in the media for years. When I was sitting in a press box, I'm not booing. And it's just not in my nature. Even if I go to a Red Sox game in the stands, I'm not booing. I mean, I'm an adult man. I just can't picture myself going, boo. Just can't picture myself doing that. I appreciate these guys for their entertainment value, things they do off the court, which Kyrie Irving seems to be pretty good at. But he continually, puts himself out there. The Brooklyn Nets, who played a damn good basketball game last night, instead of maybe praising Joe Harris, who was spectacular last night, now the whole story is Kyrie Irving's going back to Boston and he's calling it a racist city once again. So, yeah, gaslighting is the perfect word to describe this, what Kyrie Irving is pulling off. I'll tell you what, October 3rd at Gillette Stadium, Tom Brady's coming to town with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's going to be 68,000 people at Gillette Stadium. Some will boo him. That I don't understand. The man won 6 Super Bowls playing for you and was kind of forced out by Bill Belichick. But there'll still be Patriot toadies who are going to boo Tom Brady. Tom freaking Brady. Adam Vinatieri, who just announced he's retiring today, came back here in 2006 after winning 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots and being a very key component to those, and got booed. He was kind of forced out by Bill Belichick. Kyrie Irving doesn't have that capital of Adam Vinatieri or Tom Brady. They got booed. And they handled it, and now Kyrie Irving is going to get booed, and his way to combat it is saying, well, if you're booing me, it's got to be connected to racism. White guys get booed that come back here. Bill Laimbeer got booed all the time, more so than anyone. He embraced it. He never played for the Celtics, although he was born in Boston, believe it or not. But, yeah, if you're a professional athlete, you're going to get booed on the road. I don't think Kyrie Irving can deal with it. That's the biggest issue. So now his way of combating it is saying, well, if you're booing me, you don't appreciate my art and how great I am as a basketball player, you're just a racist, and that's terrible.
You're right, Sap. It's the perfect shield. It's what LeBron does with building up his opponent before a series to make himself look better. But Kyrie's doing.
But he doesn't use racism. And LeBron
no. I'm not saying.
Right.
I'm just saying that it's the same sort of idea. No, he doesn't use racism. No,
not at all.
LeBron, to his credit, absolutely does not go there.
No.
Could go there if he wanted to, because honestly, I don't know if I'm sure he's faced it in his life, obviously.
Of course.
But I don't know that he's been faced it, that much in basketball, because I believe if he did, he'd say it. He has no reason not to.
Well, 3 years ago, remember his mansion in Los Angeles before the start of the 2018 finals against Golden State, spray painted the N-word on his gate. So, I mean, and then, of course, there are people that hate LeBron and say it never happened. There were no instances reported, whatever the case may be. He's in a different level than Kyrie Irving. I mean,
and here's the thing that frustrates me about that, Sap, is that's awful and should never happen to anybody, black, brown, white, green, blue, purple.
Right. And you're Jewish, so your community has faced a lot of hate. Yeah. More so than, say, Italian Americans, who the hate towards Italian Americans was decades ago, and it's kind of changed because a lot of Italian Americans married other ethnicities, so it's kind of like all blended together. But I think the 3 groups of people in this country that have faced the most hate would be African Americans, Jewish Americans, and Native Americans. I think they've faced the most of any group.
Certainly African Americans and Native Americans.
More so than anyone. Yeah, absolutely.
So I said, that's awful, and again, shouldn't happen to anybody. But because it was in LA, it was like a story that lasted a day. Right. If it was in Boston, people would speak. It would have been harped on for months and months and months. That's why I'm saying it's not fair. It's not right. Boston does have a racist history. Mm-hmm. Almost every city in the country does, realistically. Yep. And that history, I feel like the city and the people of the city have genuinely taken great strides to try to make that a thing of the past. And I think that what Kyrie's doing is he's being a selfish opportunist and taking the history that is shameful and that people are embarrassed about in the city and a sore subject about, and people have been trying to erase, and turning it into a weapon for his own good. Because again, he's going to get booed. And I'm an adult too, Sep. I boo people. I have no problem doing it just because I think it's part of the fun. Never would I cross the line. Never would I say something racist or anything like that. But I will heckle somebody. Boo, you suck, whatever. Because, I mean, realistically, they don't suck. They play in the NBA.
They make a lot of money. They should be able to deal with this.
Relax. It's not that serious that I'm booing you.
No.
It's really not. So I just hate that he is ignoring all the things that he did wrong in Boston and the failure of leadership he had in Boston and the lies he told to the fan base and to presumably Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens, and bailing on his teammates, which he did in Cleveland, by the way, too. It's not like
absolutely.
It was just a Boston thing, and saying, "No, if I get booed, it's because it's racist. It's a racist city, subtle racism." It's not right. It's not right to people who actually experience racism. It's not right to people, the fans in Boston who primarily are not racist. There are racist fans in Boston, just like there are, again, in every city. But most of the fans in the Garden are not racist. They're just, listen, I'm not black. I can't say it definitively, but in my heart of hearts, Sab, I really don't believe that most of the people who attend a basketball game in 2021 in Boston are racist. No. 90% of the players are black. If you're a huge basketball fan shelling out big money for tickets, presumably you like the NBA, you'd have to have a real fucking screw loose to be racist.
Well, I mean, there are some people that will appreciate the art and the beauty of the game and how skilled these guys are, but not embrace them as human beings. There are some people that think that way. Now, I have a very close friend of mine, actually my lifelong friend of almost 40 years, who is an usher, works part-time as an usher at TD Garden. And I asked him, I texted him earlier today, and he's been there over 10 years, that if you ever heard the N-word uttered at TD Garden. Now he'll work a section, one game, another section, another game. So he's got a pretty good work experience there, a long period of time. He quickly texts back to me, no. Flat out, no, not like I'm not sure. And he's a pretty, direct guy. He's not going to sugarcoat anything. And he said no. So he's been there 10, 11 years. He said he's never heard that. Now, maybe Kyrie heard it outside the arena. That could be the case. We know Marcus Smart's story where, the fans who were cheering him all of a sudden when he was driving and, had to come to an abrupt stop, the lady gave him the finger. It's just, but that doesn't necessarily mean she gave him the finger because he's black. She may have given him the finger because he, whatever. Again, if you don't like someone and they're black, doesn't make you racist. That you can't jump to that conclusion. That's a whole different thing. And it's dangerous if people think that that's the case.
Yeah, it's if you don't like them because they're black, that makes you racist.
That's
if you don't like them and they happen to be black, not the same thing.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm at, Sep. I hate doing this. I don't want to do this. I didn't want to do this today because, again, you can tell I'm getting frustrated and it's upset me. It's something that I've been thinking about since he said it too. Because I don't want to ever look like I'm defending the behavior of racists or denying somebody's truth or something like that. It's just this with this one particular guy and the timing of it and the fact that he's never said anything before. I just think it's bullshit. I'm sorry. When Torrey Hunter said it, I believe Torrey Hunter 100%. Mm-hmm. When Adam Jones said it, I believed Adam Jones at Fenway 100%. Even I think there was an incident with DeMarcus Cousins and they kicked out somebody and banned him for life. I believe DeMarcus Cousins 100%. I'm not somebody who's going to, be like, Kirk and Callahan and say, no, this would never happen. Impossible. They're making it up for.
Prove it. Make sure you prove it. And it's like, well, sometimes these are tough to prove.
I'm not doing that. I don't think that that's the right thing to do. And I believe these people. But with Kyrie, I don't think it's fair to say if we're here today, Sep, saying I don't believe Kyrie and like he's doing this. This is a different case than Torrey Hunter and Adam Jones and DeMarcus Cousins. This is years later, right before he's heading to Boston for the first time. And he could say, I've played in Boston before. Okay, well, you haven't played in front of fans in Boston since you demoed the team, basically.
Yeah.
And lied to fans' faces. And for him to do it now, I do think it's fair to say this is a complete revisionist history, gaslighting, bullcrap, whatever you want to call it, and not look like you're defending racism or defending anything like that. See, the thing is, he's put people like you and me and even Kendrick Perkins, who I saw take some heat for what you said earlier, defending Boston, in an impossible situation. And it's such an unfair situation because it makes it seem like they're trying to defend racism when really they're just trying to say, Kyrie, just, be a normal person. Don't do stuff like this to defend because you're so uncomfortable with getting booed.
He's a narcissist. I mean, he's a classic narcissist. In some ways, he feels like a mini Donald Trump. I mean, there seems to be some connection there that they're both kind of the same way, which is kind of scary. The scary part was Donald Trump was president of the United States for 4 years, the most important person in the world. Kyrie Irving is a basketball player, but he's beloved by a lot of people. Again, as you watch him on the court, you're like, this guy is magical. But it starts to tarnish a little bit of what he does on the court when he does these types of things. One thing I wanted to introduce into this, and I haven't heard anybody mention this, his dad, Derek Irving, played 4 years at Boston University from 1984 to 1988. I wonder what his experience was in Boston during those years. And you know how Kyrie may have selective amnesia, or maybe he's probed a little bit more with his dad, and maybe his dad had some issues with racism back in the 80s when Boston was not maybe as progressive as it is now. I just wonder what that connection is. We know he's very close with his dad, and his dad was a really good college player and played in Australia. In fact, Kyrie was born in Australia. I just wonder what that part of it would lend us to maybe deduct more into this. But again, he was here in the 80s. Maybe he put forth some stories that he had some bad times here in Boston back 35 years ago. I remember when Barry Bonds came to town, and back in 2007, he played a 3-game series at Fenway Park. I've never heard anybody booed as loudly as Barry Bonds was booed that entire weekend series. By the end, it kind of subsided, and the fans were like, this guy seems pretty cool about the whole situation. So we're not getting under his skin as he was just, hitting doubles and home runs throughout the whole weekend. His godfather is Willie Mays, and Willie Mays apparently had some issues here. There's a famous story where Willie Mays came here to try out, and the Red Sox said, we'll get back to you. Apparently, he wasn't good enough to cut the Red Sox team back in the early 50s. Obviously, there was racist tones with Tom Yawkey owning the team back then. So he echoed that to Bonds, and I think Bonds came here very sensitive to what the issue was going to be. And after the series, said, I had a really good time there. In fact, his son went to private school an hour outside of Boston. And again, I don't think if you're in a restaurant or in a setting with a guy like Barry Bonds, you're going to go up to him and start shouting the N-word. The guy's 6'2", 240 pounds, could rip your head off. I don't think anybody that ran into Kendrick Perkins outside of the arena was going to call him the N-word. There would be a price to pay, and rightfully so. So there's just so much that factors into this. And again, I'll go back to my original point, Jet, that if this is Chris Paul or pick any other player in the league that's well-respected, LeBron James, Dame Lillard, then we'd say, ooh, that's not good. Because it's Kyrie Irving, we're like, the boy who cried wolf, it's him again. And again, I think he's just putting up a shield so that Friday night, when he's booed by, I believe, 25% capacity, he's going to have people on their heels a little bit. What do the fans do on Friday night? I'm more interested in about Monday because it's going to be a full house, and the Nets are going to be on their way to sweeping through the Celtics quicker than, I had my colonoscopy. But what will the fans do? Like, are the fans going to be creative with this and just be silent?
No.
Which would, I think, get under his skin. I think he kind of wants to be booed, although I don't know how he handles that. And then he's kind of like,
prove his point. We
He's
talked about this the other day.
He's a narcissist. There's no other way to describe that. And look, most great athletes have some narcissism in them. He takes it to a whole different level.
When he's the first time the Nets played the Celtics after he signed with the Nets, he didn't play in Boston. The fans chanted, like, where is Kyrie? And we're booing, and he put out like a 2-page long Instagram statement about, like, how unfair, sports are entertainment and people should. He couldn't even deal with it then when he wasn't even in the freaking arena. So he's not going to be able to deal with it now. And he's created, exactly as you put it, Sep, a shield for himself to say, I am not being booed for anything I did wrong. I am being booed because it's racism. And it's just such and Sep, so he's putting a lot of people in terrible positions. He's putting every single current player on the Celtics in a horrible position right now because either they look like they're saying, yeah, we're experiencing racism in Boston, and it looks like that they're turning on their city, or if they disagree with Kyrie, saying that it looks like, you're defending potential racist behavior. He's put them in an awful position.
Yeah.
Like, look at what Kendrick Perkins said, Sep. He said he's never experienced here. And, I applaud him for coming out and saying that. I would fully believe if he did, he would say something too. I've never known Kendrick Perkins to hold anything back.
No.
But if you look at the comments on the video that he said, so many people calling him an Uncle Tom, people calling him terrible names and saying, you're defending racism, you're in the pocket of like the white man and stuff like that. I mean, so why, when Kyrie Irving can say something like that, people will say, yeah, speak your truth, Kyrie. Kevin Durant was saying, speak your truth behind the scenes in the Zoom, egging him on, saying, go ahead. But Kendrick Perkins can't, and is shamed for that. And all the Celtics, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, are now all put in that situation where if it looks like they're betraying their race, if they were to say, no, I haven't experienced anything like that in Boston. And if they were to say, yeah, I have experienced something like that in Boston, then, they're demoing their team. So Kyrie put them in a horrible situation.
And Kyrie doesn't care. That's the thing about it, because he's a narcissist. And I look at Kendrick Perkins saying that he never faced this on or off the court in 8.5 years. And like you said, Jet, he's faced a lot of backlash from that. Perkins works for ESPN, which is considered a woke network, right? So if he had come out and said something, do you think he was going to get suspended? This wasn't going to be like Paul Pierce losing his job because he had strippers rubbing his head and he was drunk and high at a poker game. I mean, like, this is a different situation. If Perkins had said, yeah, I faced this in Boston, ESPN would have run with it and applauded him at some point, but give Perk credit for just telling the truth. And like he said, you want me to go on national TV and lie? I don't do that. God bless Perk. That's why we love him so much. I mean, even after the game, he was like, the Boston Celtics are an embarrassment on the basketball court. The whole Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant dynamic is strange, right? I mean, on the court, it's magical. Those two guys together with Harden, man, that's scary. But they have some sort of connection that's kind of bizarre. And I really think Kyrie Irving is loved by players in that league. I think they think he's really bright and deep, and he's kind of the Pied Piper, right? I mean, don't you remember when after one finals, I think it was in 2017 perhaps, or 2016 or whenever, that LeBron posted a workout video, and then Kyrie Irving with Steph Curry were out mocking LeBron. Right. This is his own teammate. So, again, this guy is such a narcissist that he thinks he was the guy behind winning that championship because he hit the game-winning three-point shot. That'd be like Ray Allen coming out now and saying, I got LeBron one of those championships because I hit the game-tying three-point shot in Game 6 against San Antonio. That's where his mind is. But Durant is another guy that I just, you can't wrap your hands around or your head around, because he's just such a weird guy himself. He's constantly fighting with people on Twitter. It's a weird dynamic. And I just think Kyrie, maybe you don't think it or I don't think it or don't quite understand it, he carries a lot of weight in that league for some reason.
Yeah, and it sucks, like you said, because he's steering them in the wrong direction. When he was steering them against the bubble too, he was steering them in the wrong direction there. Mm-hmm. He tried to break off the league and say we should start our own league, which is steering the players in a terrible direction. He makes a ton of money, and talks about remember when he was with the Celtics and he's saying, I'm so ready for this shit to be over with the cameras on him and stuff like that, while he was wearing his Uncle Drew hat. And so he makes it seem like he's the fighting for the average man, but meanwhile, when he goes to the team, he doesn't give a penny of his salary back. Mm-hmm. He's donated money. That's great. That's wonderful. I applaud that. But, he makes it seem like it's a burden to play basketball. And I don't see him retiring anytime soon or giving any of the money back or anything like that. And in addition to that, Sap, you're right that players do think that he is, for some reason, this, really genius guy. But he's flaked on his teammates before. So I don't know that people think he's a good teammate. Maybe they think he's just a bright guy, but he had problems with his teammates in Cleveland and Boston. I'm sure it will eventually. It was happening in Brooklyn, and then
early in the season
came back to the fold. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of him. Him and the Kevin Durant dynamic is weird too. By the way, I would say if Durant thinks it's so true about Boston, also, why did you take a meeting with the Celtics when you were a free agent? And why were they on your short list? And Kyrie, why, if you didn't like Boston, why did you not block a trade to come to the Celtics? Why did you cut a promo saying you wanted your number in the rafters?
He seemed very enthused to come here. Now, maybe something happened in the 2 years he was here, or something's happened in the 2 years since he left to go to Brooklyn. Again, he's never played before a fan at TD Garden because he didn't play in the games when fans were allowed in TD Garden. And the only game that the Nets came here this year was on Christmas Day with no fans in the stands. So that's an interesting dynamic that he's going to face Friday in Game 3 and more so in Game 4 on Monday. It's kind of odd that the stabilizing force of the Brooklyn Nets is James Harden, right? I mean, like, he seems to be the guy that you kind of look at and say he's the steadiest of these three guys, right? I mean, and if there's any hesitancy to pick Brooklyn to win the championship, you're all bought in. You said a month and a half ago, I've seen the light. They're going to win the title. It's going to make you throw up at some point. I still think that the Bucks can beat them in the next round, or the 76ers in the conference finals, and the Lakers in the finals. Something could happen. The biggest hesitancy picking them is Kyrie Irving, right? Because at some point in the next month and a half, he could implode the whole situation, right? I mean, he's still quite capable of that.
Yeah, he is. It comes down to this for me, Sap. He's going to get booed here because he lied to the fans and because he quit on the team. Facts, not opinion. He colluded in the middle of the season with Kevin Durant to leave the Celtics and go to the Nets. Fact, not opinion. There's video of it. We've talked
2 max contracts. We've seen it a million times.
Quit on the team in the middle of the season. And when you know you're going, you're not motivated to play for the current team you're on. Again, this is why he's going to get booed. It has nothing to do with racism. No. Maybe there's some overlap where there are some racist fans who are going to boo him for that too.
Sure.
Maybe. I don't discount that possibility. That's in every city. It's not Boston. It's painting with a broad brush. It's every city. It's New York. It's Chicago. It's Dallas. It's Indiana. Name a city. There's going to be somebody who is sitting in the arena that is racist.
Racism's prevalent throughout the entire country. We've seen this in elections in 2016 and 2020. There was that component in those presidential elections. So let's not just pin it on the city of Boston. We've had our issues here. I think we've done a better job. We did have a lot of room to grow, and we still have a lot of room to grow. But, other cities and other communities have had issues. I just go back to Dominique Wilkins several days ago. Again, if that was Paul Pierce denied access to a restaurant because of a quote-unquote dress code, that would have been a topic on ESPN with Bomani Jones, and he would have been writing pieces, and Howard Bryant would have been writing pieces. And they would all have piled on, and it would be there it is again, Boston's racist. Well, what about Atlanta? I mean, the Deep South has its own issues, right? I mean, that's pretty deep and cutting, historically. And we have our problems here, but it's everywhere in the country. There's no racism in Chicago. There's no racism in Denver. Pick any city. I mean, Los Angeles, San Francisco, any major city, there's issues here. They were pronounced here. And I think part of it is we're kind of isolated in a sense, right? Because we're part of this megalopolis, which is Boston all the way to Washington, or maybe you can even include Baltimore. But those other major cities are closer together. And then you go to New York, and we're 225 miles from New York. So we're kind of this like outlier. Like there's Connecticut, and then you're into Massachusetts, and then here we are. So we're kind of isolated at some point. And I think part of the thing with Boston too is the people here are so parochial. Like, it just takes them time to warm up to people. So maybe that sets off racist vibes. Because they're not as warm and understanding. And I've said this a million times, Jet, and people get bent out of shape when I say it. New Yorkers are much friendlier than Bostonians. And every time I tell a Bostonian that, they flip out. And at that point, I use Glenn Ordway's favorite line, "You're proving my point." You're taking offense to what I'm saying. So I think that's part of it, that maybe it gets looked at as racist, that people aren't warm and fuzzy. It takes a while for them to warm up to you. But again, I go back to my friend who's been at TD Garden as an usher for 10, 11 years, and he's a very observant guy. And he said he's never heard the N-word uttered once at a Celtics game. Now, that's what I'm going by with that thing.
And again, this isn't something, again, I wanted to do today. I feel it almost feels dirty to have to to have this conversation. But I just can't abide letting Kyrie Irving change the narrative of why he's going to get booed here. I don't
Right.
think that's right, and I don't think using racism as a weapon or shield or whatever he's doing here it is in the best interest of the Black community or
No,
Jewish community or any community when it's coming from a place of complete self interest. And I think that's what Kyrie Irving is all about. Is really at the end of the day is self interest.
he's a
I can't
narcissist, right?
I
I
can't
mean, true
stand the guy,
definition.
Sap. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't stand the guy. I hope he gets booed loudly. Actually, you're right. It would be funnier if it was just silence. I don't know what he would do with that. It's almost impossible to try to coordinate that. Amongst a couple thousand fans, and then went to 100% capacity. 30,000 fans. But you shouldn't. If I were going to the game on Friday, which I'm not, because I'm not giving this team a one red cent. I would boo him loudly, but I think he's taking that away from fans now, where they're like, "Oh man, if I boo him, am I racist?" No,
Right.
you're booing him because he's a dick.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with him being racist. You being
And
racist.
again, Tom Brady's going to get booed on October 3rd by some people at Gillette Stadium,
Yeah,
not
most
the
people will
entire
cheer
place.
him, for sure.
Most people will cheer him, but there will be some people that boo him. And again, I think he was forced out of New England, and Adam Vinatieri constantly got booed when he came back here with the Indianapolis Colts. I think he was forced out of New England. Kyrie, he's the one who planned his exit from the Boston Celtics. The only good thing about this discussion, and I always like doing these discussions because it kind of does break the monotony of breaking down game 2 of a playoff series, right, which clearly is over. So we didn't have to spend much, if any, time talking about how bad the Celtics were last night and how impressive the Nets look and whatever. But there are other good series that deserve some talking about.
Yeah. So last point before we get into that, Sap, into the rest of the games last night and the games that are coming up today, sort of just wrapping up this whole Kyrie Irving thing. As far as Boston goes, the way that you get booed if you are playing against a Boston team, if you are former Celtic, Patriot, Bruin, Red Sox, if you go in free agency to a rival team, Yankees, the Heat with Ray Allen got booed because he went to the Heat, who were the Celtics rivals at the time. If you go to the Canadians, if you're a Bruin, ex-Bruin, even Chara, I think, is probably going to get a little bit booed. Got a little bit booed because he's on the Caps now. I'm sure there are some fans who probably booed him.
If they did, then they're as insane
it's
as
the same as the Brady stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one for me was Johnny Damon. He was here for 4 years, won a World Series, went to the Yankees, and I remember talking to a bunch of UPS drivers because that's what I do, and they was like, "I can't believe he went to the Yankees." I said, "Well, the Red Sox offered him 4 years, $40 million. The Yankees offered him 4 years, $52 million, which is 30% more." I said, "Would you leave UPS to go to FedEx for 30% increase on your salary?" They go, "Oh, absolutely." I go, "That's all he did." Like, I never get offended when guys leave.
But some people do. And again, they're your arch rival team. That's why Vinatieri got booed, because he went to the Colts, who were the Patriots rival at the time.
They didn't want to give him the money he deserved in Foxborough. And he's a businessman.
No, but you were for
he
the
wanted
laundry.
to play with that. You do. Oh, absolutely. See, I'm not that guy. I'm the complete opposite. I'm an Aaron Rodgers guy. If he ends up in Denver, then I'll become a Denver Bronco fan until he retires, and I'll find some other quarterback. I'm that shallow. I get it.
That's why we have a good dynamic, Sap, because I completely, admittedly, root for the laundry. 100%.
Yeah, no, I don't. Not at all. I went from being a Pittsburgh Pirates fan to a San Francisco Giants fan like that.
But there's also a level of respect in Boston, especially with Celtics fans, for appreciating greatness. Kobe Bryant was cheered multiple times in Boston. Last game of his career, he got a standing ovation. There was an MVP chant for Kobe Bryant one year when he was in Boston. He, tortured the Celtics. He was a Lakers, but people appreciate greatness. The last time LeBron will come here, he will get a standing ovation in Boston.
I would hope so.
I guarantee you he will. If he announces his retirement a year ahead of time, the last time he comes to Boston, he'll get a standing ovation. I fully believe that.
I was at the games when it was going to be Dr. J's last appearance at the Old Garden and Kareem's last appearance at the Old Garden. In fact, we were sitting courtside because they used to sit the media there. Right. And we even got up and cheered those guys because they meant so much to the league. And I was fine with that. I got up and cheered them because these guys were pillars. I mean, they built the league. And again, in the end, whether you're covering the sport or not, it's still entertainment, and you are a sports fan and you can appreciate greatness. I've never been a guy at the end of a movie that, cheered the credits. maybe a couple of times.
What about when the plane lands? Do you cheer the landing?
No, I've never understood that. I
Those
I
people are the
kind of
worst.
I kind of hope the plane lands. It shouldn't come as a surprise, right? Like
But
that's
like,
kind of the idea of what the pilot and what the plane are all
but
about. Get the thing down safely.
but take guys who did good work in Boston when they were playing here and
Yep.
then go to other teams, that's not rival teams or that they didn't say, I'm going to sign in Boston and then sign somewhere else. Like Antoine Walker, he was not booed when he came
No,
back to Boston or, there's been, countless
Pierce
other guys who
wasn't.
leave in free agency. Isaiah Thomas obviously wasn't, Pierce certainly wasn't. Kevin Garnett wasn't. Rondo hasn't been booed when he's come back multiple
Well,
times. In fact, he gets applauded.
those guys had longer stays here. Kyrie Irving was 2 years and it ended poorly. I'm going to be interested to see, not that, he's a great player, but he's made the All-Star team once. I want to see what happens with Gordon Hayward if he's healthy next year when they come to TD Garden, what the reception will be for him. And again, he's not a guy that exactly inspires like hate or love. I mean, he's perfectly compared to grilled chicken over salad. I mean, he's not really that type of polarizing figure. Kyrie certainly has developed into a polarizing figure.
Yeah. It's just, again, not something I thought we were going to be doing today. Not something I really wanted to do. That guy just really irks me, Sap. I mean, really. And no professional athlete that I can ever remember.
And he likes that. Again, he's a classic narcissist. So he's laughing all the way to the bank. And again, this is why it's pretty easy to cheer against the Brooklyn Nets. For me, it's very easy because my guy's in the other conference and I can just see Lakers, Brooklyn, NBA Finals, and it's going to be tough to overcome that team. But give it time. Kyrie may fuck it up at some point.
I hope beyond hope that that's what happens, Sap. All right, so we'll get into what happened last night. We don't have to talk about the Celtics Nets anymore. Nope. That was a 130 to 108 blowout, complete embarrassment. The Celtics sucked, and Nets are really good. That's basically the recap of that and that series.
Good summation.
Thank you. I said this last night, Sap, on Twitter. I've seen enough with these three series. All the teams that won last night are winning the series. Calling it. Lakers 109-102 over the Suns. Mavericks 127 to 121 over the Clippers. Anything in those other two games that stood out to you? I know you want to talk about the Lakers a little bit more in depth. We don't have to go, play by play here, but what did they do? What changed to win the game? I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you.
You're like the pollster or prognosticator at 8:05 that calls the presidential election. I mean,
that's why Dallas I'm up that late.
You're up that late, determining all of the algorithms and what could or may not happen in these series. Dallas is up 2-0. They won both games in Los Angeles, so they're going home for games 3 and 4. I think it's only happened 4 times in the history of the NBA where a team lost its first 2 games at home in a best-of-7 series and came back to win it. The Celtics did it a few years ago against the Chicago Bulls. They lost the first 2 games at the Garden, then Rondo got hurt, and they swept the Bulls the next 4 games. So you need that type of thing to happen if you're the Clippers. And the Clippers are a team that just can't seem to get its act together, right? I mean, it's just they're playing piss-poor defense. Luka Doncic just continues to take his game to another level. I know everybody calls him Baby Bird. There's some aspects of his game that are similar to Bird. There's some that are different. That guy is nasty. That guy is going to be in the conversation as the best player in the world probably within 2 years. And it kind of makes me laugh when a year or 2 years ago, and maybe even now when people go, well, Jason Tatum is better than Luka Doncic. No, not even close. So I think that series is over because the Clippers just don't seem to play defense. They don't know who to go to down the stretch. They're just not getting their act together. They tanked the last 2 games to take on Dallas, and Dallas seems to have taken this personally, and Doncic is playing at a high level. I agree with you that on Dallas. I feel comfortable now with the Lakers. It got a little scary in the fourth quarter when Jay Crowder hits a 3, gets fouled and hits the free throw to cut it to 1 with 7 minutes left. I'm like, geez, the Lakers were up 15 what felt like a minute ago, and now it's down to 1. But down the stretch, when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the court together, and they're playing at a solidly high level, not otherworldly, but a high level, you're going to be tough to beat. And again, with Chris Paul, his role diminished because of the injury. The Lakers should be in good shape after what they did last night in Phoenix. And, of course, the big reason, Anthony Davis, right? When Anthony Davis plays that, they're going to be tough to beat, even in the finals against Brooklyn, because who the hell's stopping him for the Brooklyn Nets? Phoenix has some size with DeAndre Ayton. He can kind of, battle Anthony Davis, but Davis is too good for any big man in the league, save maybe Joel Embiid. So yeah, Anthony Davis stepping up like that, 21 free throws. That's pretty impressive. He was the guy to go to. And LeBron, like you've said a million times, it doesn't surprise you when he makes big shots. And he's not playing great. He's picking his spots, but in the fourth quarter, hit a big three, hit a big turnaround, made the plays necessary to get them over the top. And again, the one thing about the Lakers, they always play defense. Even guys that can't buy a basket, KCP or Alex Caruso and the rest of those, role players, even if they're not scoring, they will play defense. And a big part of it is because that's in their DNA. And also because when your two best players are that engrossed defensively, like Anthony Davis and LeBron James, it kind of filters through the entire roster. I think they're in good shape, especially with Chris Paul. I don't know what his situation is. If it's a stinger, it could get better over the next few days. They're calling it a contusion. There's something wrong with him. And even though Campaign played really well last night, with maybe the weirdest looking shot I've ever seen, right? His jump shot is bizarre. He played well and, did a nice job, but he's not Chris Paul. I think the Lakers are in good shape. I said 6 at the beginning of the series, and I'll stick with that.
Yeah, I'm still sticking with my 5. Like I said, the only chance the Suns had was they had to say, we have 3 great players. You have 2 great players. All right. 3 of our great players need to play really well in this series. Chris Paul has this. It's unfair to say, this series, because he does seem like he's dealing with an injury that he's got a thing in the playoffs, but I kind of think he's got a thing in the playoffs. I mean, he's not been outstanding in the playoffs in his career.
No, he's kind of the opposite of Rondo, right? Rondo is one thing in the regular season and this playoff Rondo, although this year it hasn't worked, because I think if you put an LA Clippers uniform on, Michael Jordan would probably suck with the Clippers and not be able to win multiple series. They should just move to a different city. I mean, if Steve Ballmer wasn't so invested in building that arena, and again, he could call it off, build it and sell it or whatever. He's got $80 billion. I don't think any decision is going to impact him financially. They probably should move the franchise. They are going to always be in the shadow of the Lakers.
Yeah,
they were in San Diego for a while. Maybe you go back to San Diego, maybe you move. But again, he's investing $3 billion into a new arena. Again, he can still build it, sell it, and still have concerts or whatever else he wants to do there. He's got plenty of money. That's not a concern. We're not going to have a telethon for Steve Ballmer anytime soon. But the Lakers should be in good shape at this point. And as you said, Chris Paul, even when healthy, he's never really elevated in the postseason. He did have that game-winning shot against San Antonio to end that series back in 2015, but he's always dealing with some sort of injury. And again, smaller point guards, as we get deeper into the season, they get banged up. I mean, that's just Allen Iverson did it. Isaiah Thomas with the Celtics, we know by the end of the 2017 playoffs, he was walking wounded. It's tough to be the best player on a team when you're 5'11". It really is. I mean, the original Isaiah Thomas was able to pull that off. And I do remember in the 88 finals, him having a horrific ankle injury, which obviously he played through, but the Pistons, which had a 3-2 lead in that series, ended up losing in 7 games. The small guys tend to be banged up by the time we progress through the postseason. So I think that's going to impact Phoenix. This could be the Lakers' toughest series in the West.
Yeah, because they will have flipped the seeding.
Right.
They will essentially be the 2 seed, which is more or less. This looks more like the Lakers are the 2 and Phoenix is the 7.
That's what it is. I mean, when do you ever see the 7 seed favored over the 2 seed? It just doesn't happen. If the Lakers get through this series, they play the winner of Portland, Denver. I think they'll beat either of those teams, especially Denver doesn't have Jamal Murray and Portland plays no defense. Give me the team in the postseason that plays lockdown defense against the team that plays no defense. And then at that point, you're playing Dallas or Utah or Memphis in the conference finals. And as great as Luka is, I don't think he's ready to beat LeBron and Anthony Davis. So things are opening up for the Lakers. It hasn't been announced yet. I wonder if there's a potential suspension for Anthony Davis for that flagrant one. That was dirty. That was a dirty play.
Super dirty.
Yeah. Is the league going to suspend an LA Laker who's that important to the league and the ratings? They didn't do anything with LeBron when it came to COVID, which that's a different situation, and he is LeBron James. I don't think Michael Jordan would have been suspended from the postseason for violating COVID protocol if there was such a situation 35 years ago. I thought Anthony Davis, what he did, that was blatant.
I think there should be
blatant.
2 suspensions from that game. Davis, 100%. When it's that obvious, you should be suspended. I mean, that was a karate kick to the testes.
It was.
And the other people that should be suspended, all those referees, they called a foul on Jay Crowder somehow on that play.
Right. Yeah, I know that.
And then reviewed it and still called a foul on Jay Crowder.
That's the worst, right? When you make a mistake.
Testicles to foot is a foul on the guy with the testicles now?
Well, that's they're just playing ball at that point, And look, Jay Crowder's a guy who has a reputation of being a pretty dirty player, so maybe the reputation preceded him. But I did see Anthony Davis's size 16 foot go into Jay Crowder's nuts, and that's never a good feeling. The
Charles only Barkley part of Jay Crowder that made contact with Anthony Davis were his balls.
Right.
To his foot.
And Charles Barkley and Shaq, had a great time at halftime with it. That's why that show is like miles ahead of any other pre-halftime and post-game show. Those guys.
I thought Draymond was pissed. Was pissed that it's not getting talked about more. Well, fairly so. He got suspended in the finals.
I'm a Laker guy. I brought it up. Yeah, and Draymond has more of a reputation than Anthony Davis. Which, if you're a Laker fan, okay, maybe he gets suspended, but it shows Anthony Davis was playing with a little bit of an edge last night, right? Which is if he does that. You'd like, okay, he looks fired up, because that's kind of the criticism of Anthony Davis. We know how talented the guy is. He's the most. Well, is he still the most talented big in the league? It's either he or Embiid. And I know that Jokic is going to win MVP, but those guys, I think their ceiling's higher. Can be more dominant. They may not put up the numbers that Jokic does, but those are the two most dominant big guys in the league. I don't know which one's better. They get somewhat of a different skill set, but they almost feel like guards who were, in Anthony Davis 6'11" and Embiid 7'1". Their skill set's kind of silly. So maybe Anthony Davis is going to play with an edge the rest of the postseason. If that's the case, the Lakers will be fine, because LeBron's still kind of feeling out these things. And we saw that even last night. When they need baskets, he gets baskets. He's still ridiculously great passer. The more I watch him, I think you can make the case he's the greatest passer ever. He or Magic Johnson. It's just like one of those two guys. First of all, they're both 6'9", so they can see over the entire defense. That does give them an advantage. But some of the passes he was making last night are just exquisite. Even the basic ones where he's driving the lane and he kicks to a three-point shooter, the pass is always right in the shooting pocket. Like, it's never, see Giannis.
It remains and always has been his greatest skill.
It is his best. It is. That's why when people make the comparisons to Jordan, I'm like, it's like comparing, it's like comparing a running quarterback with a pocket passer. It's like, how do you compare Tom Brady to Cam Newton? It's like different or
one's better.
One is notoriously better, although Cam did win an MVP and has had his moments. But you get my point. Like LeBron and Michael Jordan, it's not even a comparison. He's the best passer I think the sport's ever seen. He's right there with Magic. And Magic piled up a lot of assists as the ball was always in his hands, and you get an assist when you dump it to Kareem and hit the sky hook. That's pretty nice to have. But so they looked good last night. They could have closed the game out a little better. I don't know what they were continually fouling Devin Booker for, but maybe they bet the over.
Fine. The only chance the Suns had was Chris Paul had to play at an MVP level. He hasn't. They're just not going to with this injury now. That's over. The Mavericks won. The Clippers are screwed. They're toast. We don't even have to talk about that series. So I've seen enough, Sap. I said it at 5 a.m. I maintain it now. Celtics, I knew from the beginning they were toast in 4. The Lakers, I think, still 5, and the Clippers might lose the next 2. I don't even know, Sap.
And then what does Steve Ballmer do? Does he fire Ty Lue? Does he trade Paul George? Does Kawhi go into free agency because he can opt out after this year?
I can tell you, it clearly appears that it was not Doc Rivers' fault, whatever happened last year.
No. This is a team. Look, Kawhi's your best player. He's not a leader, right? Is that evident? Can we all agree on that? Kawhi's a phenomenal player. He's just not a leader. And again, let's look back 2 years ago when he won the title. It was a pretty fortunate run that he went on. He played a Golden State team that was depleted. What did Kevin Durant play? 12 minutes in that series? And the one game Durant played, Golden State did win. Clay gets hurt late in the series. Steph Curry's playing with it.
LeBron's playing depleted. And Suns team,
it helps.
If he plays the Nuggets in the next round, it'll be a depleted Nuggets team. And then I don't know who the hell he's going to play in the conference finals at this point, because it's not going to be the Clippers. It's not that difficult of a path. They were making it seem like it was murderer's row, but it's not.
No, I think it's kind of opening up for him. For pure basketball artistry, I'd like to see LeBron against Luka. I think that would be a fabulous Western Conference series.
They're never going to play a playoff series with this Clippers team after all the hype that the two teams are going to meet.
Yeah, because going back to 2 years ago, that was a done deal, right? The Clippers and Lakers were at another level, and we kind of bought into it too, Jet. We always keep talking about five teams that can win the title, and we always put the Clippers in there, and it's like they're missing something.
Yeah. Shame on them. Shame on them.
Yeah, no, they've got two elite players who maybe don't want to play defense anymore. I mean, those are guys that are great wing defenders, but not. See, here's the thing. When Kawhi was younger, and he's only 29, it's not like he's an old man, but, in San Antonio and even with Toronto, he had some really good players on Toronto. I think we forget how good that team was because the year before they were right there, then got swept by LeBron in the conference finals, I believe, or semifinals. It was the semifinals because then LeBron beat the Celtics in the finals. And then the year after Kawhi left, Toronto was the number 2 seed going into the bubble. Yeah. They took the Celtics 7 games. So it's not like Toronto fell apart without Kawhi Leonard. In fact, I think the 22 games he missed in Toronto in the 1 year he was there, they went 17-5. So he may just be a guy who, in a vacuum is great, but doesn't really impact winning a lot. Although the games he's played, I think he has the highest winning percentage of any player in league history.
In history, yeah.
Nice to have played with, Tim Duncan.
Yeah, I'm not going to
those guys. I'm not
Kawhi that much. This is a failure, but I like him better than you do. It's a failure in the
entire organization, but he's not really a leader. And now here's the thing with Paul George and Kawhi. The thing we always like them as players is their ability to defend. Well, now they're being asked to score more and do those types of things, and sometimes the defense falls off. Again, reason 5,260 that LeBron and Michael Jordan are the 2 greatest players ever because they've been asked to do all of that stuff and play on the defensive end. And for the most part, they've held their end of the bargain up on the defensive end as well, whereas I think Kawhi and Paul George aren't the elite defenders they used to be. Other than maybe Luka Doncic is just that good that he
might be.
He might be. He's special and he's nasty. He's the guy who shows up on the court at the playground, and he's the guy. He's the alpha. He is fun to watch. And, I'm a Mark Cuban guy, so I would like to see Dallas Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. I think that'd be kind of fun.
I don't think there's a single player in the league that the Mavericks would trade Luka Doncic for.
No. Who would it be? No. Durant's not durable enough. LeBron's 36.
Right. Zion hasn't proven anything.
No. Embiid's not durable enough. I mean, a lot of the great players.
I think Doncic is the most valuable contract in the league.
Can make
right
that
now.
case. Yeah. That and maybe Giannis, but Giannis at the end of games.
We'll have to see how this goes in the playoffs this year for Giannis. Well, Sap, let's just quickly whip through these 3 games that are going to happen tonight. Okay, we'll do our prediction and we'll do the spread thing, and then we'll be done because we've already been. Kyrie made us go on and on about things that.
And he loved every second of it. If he's listening,
Kyrie.
Hi, Kyrie.
All
if
you're
listening, we
all right.
we
7 o'clock, Sap. Game 2, Sixers Wizards. The spread is Philadelphia by 8. I'm going to take the Sixers and think that they cover that with no problem.
Yeah, the zigzag, which went 1-2 last night, is now 3-2 throughout the playoffs, which is 60%. If you're 60% against the spreads for the entire postseason, that's damn good. Says that Philly will cover the 8-point spread because they didn't cover in game 1. I think Ben Simmons will score more than 6 points. Not asking much, but he's quite capable of it.
It's not like he's playing great defensive players.
No, he's just got that little missing ingredient of ability to shoot. So I think Philadelphia wins easily, unless Westbrook just goes completely bonkers out there, which he's quite capable of. But then we'll still see the obligatory 5 or 6 shots that you go, holy crap, that guy's one of the best players ever, and he can't shoot.
All right, so we both have Philly covering and going up 2-0 on the Wizards. At 7:30 Eastern tip-off, so overlapping a bit with the Wizards Sixers, as the Hawks and Knicks, who played an extremely entertaining game 1. The Knicks are favored by just 2 points at home. How do you see this one going, Sap?
I like the Knicks. Again, zigzag is the Knicks will cover this because Atlanta covered the first game. And Julius Randle has to play better than he did the other night if he plays to what Julius Randle's been this year, which was the near unanimous choice as most improved player in the league, deservedly so. And wasn't it cool that his 4-year-old son gave him the award? The adorable little son of his ran out to practice or whatever with the award. It was so cool. If he plays the way Julius Randle normally does, which is 26, 10, and 6, which is just phenomenal, I think the Knicks will be all right. That place is going to be nuts tonight. In fact, I know Stephen A. Smith's going to be courtside. He bought a ticket. He's going to be courtside. So you got Stephen A. Smith and Spike Lee to combat if you're a member of the Atlanta Hawks. Going to be fun. It's been I think it's going to be a really cool series because you get like some new stars. We follow basketball a lot
Bill
more
de
so than other
Blasio
people.
weighing into it.
Bill de Blasio is a complete dope anyway. I mean, just last week he was, out in Brooklyn Nets garb, and now he's in a Knicks hat. Like, pick a team. I know you got two teams in New York. By the way, you have to follow. I think you do J.L. Chauvin, who does the most incredible impressions of Trump and a million other people. He does Andrew Cuomo perfectly, and he's got Cuomo kind of bashing Bill de Blasio, who he calls Big Bird, because de Blasio is like 6'8", for not, backing the Knicks instead backing the Brooklyn Nets. Because there are people in New York that still look at the Brooklyn Nets and say, well, they're New Jersey's team.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the Knicks tonight, too. I think the home court advantage will really help them. And like you said, it was a close game, and Julius Randle didn't play well. I think we both agree this is going 7, so it would make sense to just swap games. I think it'll be another entertaining game, though. So since the spread is so little, I'll take the Knicks covering, but I not by much.
No, this is going to be a 4 or 5 point game. Yep.
And we'll finish with the last game of the night. The Grizzlies are going to look to go up 2-0 against Utah in Utah. That game's at 10 o'clock Eastern on TNT. Donovan Mitchell will be playing in this game tonight, making his return from a while since he's played basketball. Sap, Utah can't really lose this game, can they?
No. I think this is a must-win game for Utah. They lose this, then they're down 2-0. The next two would be in Memphis, which that can be a pretty loud crowd depending on how many people are allowed in. Memphis seems
South,
to be
so everybody, I assume.
Everybody's allowed in, sans masks, the hell with vaccinations. Although Memphis is a pretty cool town. Memphis and Nashville, in Tennessee are more progressive thinking, like most cities in America. I think Utah's going to absolutely blow them out tonight, because Memphis did what they had to do getting the split. They've been on this ridiculous run. First of all, they had to play really good basketball just to get into the play-in. Then they beat San Antonio in Memphis. Then they have to fly to the West Coast to take on Golden State. They win an emotional game against the Warriors. Then they kind of come halfway back home to face Utah. I think kind of all that's going to catch up with them tonight. We're going to have to see what Donovan Mitchell's like. He hasn't played since the 16th of April, so it's nearly 6 weeks. He's an athletic player. He's not natural shooter like, say, Kevin Durant could miss a year and show up and just rain threes. He did. We've seen it. Yeah, he could come back in an old timers game and you'd say, geez, this guy should still be playing in the league. Donovan Mitchell relies more on athleticism. He's only 6'1", maybe 6'2". How rusty he's going to be, how confident he's going to be on that ankle. But I think Utah steps up big time tonight. Although John Morant's got that team playing at a very high level, and Dylan Brooks is your guy. I know that.
I think them and the Nets are the two most confident teams in the league right now in terms of where they're playing at. Like, their confidence is at just like the Grizzlies think they can't lose at this point.
Yeah, and he sets off that vibe. Man, if he develops an outside shot, how good is he going to be?
Yeah, he's tremendous. He's always reminded me of John Wall. I think he can be better than John Wall. Maybe he could get to that. Maybe he could get to the level that Rose was at when he won the MVP. Yeah, he could get to that level. That's about his ceiling. I mean, that's a pretty good ceiling. He won MVP of the league.
He's 6'3". You're talking about an uber talented, uber athletic point guard. Wall, Rose, never great shooters. Russell Westbrook, never great shooters. If John Morant can become a solid outside shooter, that just opens up his entire game. He's a winner. He plays defense, and who can forget his run at Murray State when he was in college. And the rest of that team, they're tough. And Kendrick Perkins has been talking about them for weeks. Everyone was like, Memphis is going to lose to San Antonio. And if they're able to beat San Antonio, Golden State will blow them out. And Perk was like, no, don't sleep on this team, because they play sensational defense, and they score more points in the paint than any team in the league, which in the modern NBA, that's probably unnerving for some teams. It would almost be like, here comes this football team that runs the ball a lot in a passing league. That's the kind of vibe they put off. So huge game for Utah, but I think they'll win. I think Memphis, not necessarily they'll be flat, but I think they'll run out of gas tonight and get ready to go back home even 1-1.
So Utah is favored by 9.5 points.
A lot of points, though, isn't it? Yeah, but again, we know how this is in the NBA. You see this in the postseason, Jet. Like, you'll see a team get up by 15, 16, unless you're the Lakers, who always blow these leads for some reason because their offense is painful to watch at times. But sometimes all of a sudden it's 25 because the other team, at some point. I don't think Memphis will necessarily do this because they're kind of really bought in, like you said, playing with a lot of confidence. But it's a series. So if you're down 25 points, late in the third quarter, what's the point? You're not going to make a comeback, rest up and retool for the next game. It's not the Tour de France. In the Celtics case, I think they're just so bad that the lead continues to grow. They're probably playing with the least amount of confidence of any team right now.
They're going to flip around the banners in the baseline of the Garden to be white flags instead of, the banners. That's probably what they should do.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Memphis, I think you're right that they'll probably get blown out. You would think that after Utah was so flat, they'll come out with fire. Yeah. Utah lost 5 games at home in the regular season. Hard to imagine they're going to lose 2 in a row.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think we agree on all our picks tonight, Sap. And we'll be back tomorrow talking about exactly what happens. We'll see if Kyrie Irving has more to say, see if any of the Celtics respond to any of this. It's all interesting. It's all frustrating, but, that's why we're here, is to talk about all of it. Sap, enjoy the basketball tonight. Everybody else, enjoy it. Make sure that you check out the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, wherever podcasts are found. We're presented by Full Press Coverage. If you are listening to this and not watching, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/JetStryer. And check us out. Leave a comment. Enjoy the playoffs, everybody. See ya.